sent my team on the floor. I turned around to sit down, and 4 rows behind me sitting John Wooden, who had just won his 7th national championship, watching me coach my 5th game in high school.
Here, I am grateful that we have Mr. James, or I'm not going to say Mr. Coach James Harrick with us. Coach Harrick, thank you for being with us today.
Mike, it's my pleasure.
Now, I hear a little bit of, now I know where you're from, but you sound like you have a little bit of West Virginia still in you.
Well, you know, I have been out here in California 65 years. I lost it all. I really did. But then I went to Georgia and coached at Georgia for 4 years, and they couldn't understand me, and I couldn't understand them. We had a big laugh together. And I think when I came back home, I had a little bit of a Southern accent.
You picked it back. Okay. All right.
But it's called a West Virginia twang.
I love it.
Jerry West and I both had it.
Man, Jerry. And I grew up in California. I was born in Inglewood. And let me set the stage here because we are 1 week removed from the initial fires that started in Southern California. So even though this will come out in weeks, my heart goes out to, I know you're in Southern California, but I think you've been surrounded by fire, but it hasn't impacted your neighborhood.
We kind of missed us, yes. I didn't know you were born in Inglewood. I coached at Morningside High School for 9 years.
And I was fortunate to watch a video with a podcast with you and Mark Gottlieb.
Gottfried.
Of course. Thank you. But that was a very instructive and good conversation that you guys had, one coach to another, one assistant coach to his head coach. And I highly recommend what you guys said and did on that podcast. It's Mark Gottfried.
His dad, his uncle was Mike Gottfried, the football coach at Pittsburgh in Kansas.
Oh, I remember.
And Dad was the athletic director of South Alabama. So they've been in athletics their whole lives.
And that's one of the things we try to do here, Coach, is to me, and I know from what I've heard of you and from you on that podcast that life, I don't know if life imitates sport or sport imitates life or that we're all just mixed in together, but there are so many lessons from sports. And that's why I'm so glad that you're on here today.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to introduce you because your grandson and my son are roommates at Southern Virginia University. And they play basketball together. So I've met your son, Monty, and his wife, Melanie. And then I heard from Monty about, because we weren't in Georgia, you were visiting with your family, but the team, Southern Virginia, who's having a real good year this year, they invited you to come down on the court in the pre-game. It was pre-tip-off, little inspirational or motivational. And I remember he said it started with, "It's amazing." Can you tell me what you told the team?
Well, we went to practice the night before. We flew in and got there right at practice and just drove right to practice. And I had never met Trace Bevel, but Roger Reed called me and told me he was really a fine coach and won the state championship in Utah. And so I had talked to him on the phone a couple of times, so really had never met him. And Monty and I and Melanie were just watching practice, and he come over and he said, "Would you speak to the team?" And, I get that quite often to a lot of teams. And So I did, and I started off with, it's amazing, it's absolutely amazing how a young person's hearing improves when he hears praise. And what I learned, one of the things, millions of things I learned from John Wooden, was when I stepped on the floor, I took no, not, never out of my vocabulary. That's really hard to do. But if you yell and scream, or you can even raise your voice and say, hey, here at UCLA, we do it this way, is a positive statement. Son, to err is human. To make the same mistake over and over is embarrassing, is a positive statement. And as soon as you go negative, you'll see the chin go on the chest, and you've kind of lost them. So I tried to emphasize everything I said on the floor, eliminating the words no, not, and never.
Good for you. And I apologize, because really one of the biggest pieces about James Harrick, Coach James Harrick, is that he was the coach of the national championship NCAA UCLA Bruins in 1995.
Yeah, we had one marvelous, marvelous run. And I've had a great journey in coaching, Mike. It's been absolutely spectacular.
Go ahead, keep going.
I just don't think there's any coincidences in life. And I remember my mother, when I was 8th grade, told me, hey, follow the Lord and he'll guide you everywhere you go. And I put my life in his hands, and every step I took, he made happen. I often sometimes wondered, why did that happen? Why did I make that choice? And it was always the Lord guiding my life. And it's just been unbelievable. He knew me, so he started me teaching 7th grade, junior high school. So he knew that I was, I needed a lot of work. And one of the great things in junior high, I was teaching math and English, and our principal made us do lesson plans. Well, you talk about snivel like a little rat. I sniveled and hated it. I thought it was the worst thing in the world. And then I get to college, I meet John Wooden. He said, young man, I write down all our practice plan on a 3x5 card. I always plan more than I can do, and you better be practiced, planned, and prepared. Well, I'd already known how to make lesson plans, because I had spent 4 years doing it in junior high school. And then I got in high school, I taught English, and I had to make lesson plans. And so one of my greatest things in the world is, everything you do, young man, young lady, you have to be practiced, planned, and prepared. Equals performance.
And you talked about John Wooden on the sideline and being positive, but he also, I don't know, did you ever hear him yell?
Oh, yeah. I've heard him yell a few times, but not very often. And that's what I learned. I never yelled at my players. I'd always bring them in and sit down with them one-on-one. I'd say, talking to you, Mike, do you love basketball? Do you have great passion? Are you going to work hard for us? You're going to bust? You're going to do everything I tell you? Are you all in? And every answer is yes. My final question is, what I really want to know is, you going to be there when I need you? Are you going to be healthy? Are you going to be eligible? Are you going to be prepared to perform at the highest level? That's what I really need to know. And so when I get on the floor and the guy's not working hard, or this guy makes him say, I look at him and say, hey, we got a deal. And he knows.
You'd hold him to it.
Yeah, so I had took care of that before we ever stepped on the floor. Now, my 95 team, we had been together for 3 years, and I remember one time as a sophomore, I yelled at Ed O'Bannon, just one time in his whole career.
Ed O'Bannon was the star of your team on that 95 team, and a wonderful NCAA basketball player.
But I never had to yell at my guys, and because I had, we had it done before, but we about got beat in the second round when our little guard, Ty Sidney, went the length of the floor in 4.8 seconds and scored against Missouri, and we won that game. We got home that 2 days later. I'm always the first guy on the floor, and they're out there shooting. I'm not around. They want to know where I am. And finally, the manager said, Coach would like to see you all in the locker room. And I'll tell you, Mike, I had spent the whole weekend planning exactly what I was going to say, and then I wrote it down because I memorized it. I studied it, exactly what I wanted to say. And I had the chairs in a circle. And they came in, and I mean to tell you, I went after them like they had never seen me before. And yelling and screaming and yelling this and that, and mistakes made and this and that. I finally got to Edney, who had just gone the length of the floor and won the game for us. And I'm saying, Edney, that fourth foul wasn't very good. And I went on to the next guy because he just won the game for us. We came out, and no one got within 15 of us the rest of the way, all the way. As close against Oklahoma State down the stretch, and then Edney took over and we won by 11, beat Arkansas by 11. We beat Connecticut by 6, but we had them down 15 with 3 minutes to go. And the next game after that little locker room deal, we had Mississippi State, I think, down 65-25 or something like that. And so I saved my yelling and screaming for one time in the whole year. And they knew I was serious. And I talk to young coaches about yelling. I see them up yelling and screaming and cussing and this and that.
At the refs and everybody.
Yeah, well, no, at the players, even women coaches. I'm saying, hey, save that. When you need it, they're not going to listen to you. It's going to be go in one ear and out the other. But when you bring it one time, boy, whoo, did my guys listen. So that's my philosophy. And I'm different. When we lost, I almost never said a word. We need to work on this. We need improvement. Let's go on. But when we won, I was emphatic at practice and loud and boisterous and worked them really, really hard because they could take it when we win. But if you lose and you do that, they think you're punishing them. That is me. That's me. That may not be anybody else. But
well, I think it's a principle that we all learn from, because doesn't that apply to life?
I think so. At least to me it does. And I wish I had smarter when my kids were younger and had the kind of stuff I have now when they were really young, but I didn't. So, and that's part of life of growing. I've just had a marvelous run, Mike. It's just been the journey has been spectacular.
And I can't imagine, you were at Pepperdine for quite a while, and that was an interesting story. You were at Utah State as a head coach.
No, I was assistant. Assistant at Utah. I went from high school to Utah State, and that's where we joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, my family and I. When I was assistant at Utah State, we became converts, and I've been in the church ever since, and it's been just an absolutely fantastic thing for our family.
Oh, and as I apologize, but as I recall from the story, your friend Frank Arnold, who ended up being the head coach at BYU, was assistant coach at UCLA to John Wooden at the time. And I think, did he refer that Utah State job to you?
Frank Arnold, I was Morningside High School. We had a guy by the name of Stan Love, Kevin Love's dad.
Wow.
A player for Miami, who's been in the league about 16 years. And I watched Kevin being born. He used to be my ball boy when I'd go to Oregon. And so Stan played for us, and Frank recruited him to Oregon. And they got second to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar 3 years in a row in the late 60s and did a great job. And Frank, Steve Belko, the coach at Oregon, resigned, and Frank didn't get the job. And I never forget the phone call. He called me because nobody knew each other in those days. There weren't emails and cell phones and stuff like that. So
social media.
And Frank called me. He says, I'm a man without a country. He was so depressed. And a few days later, Wooden called him and hired him as his assistant. So he comes down, and in 73, we had the Morningside High School. We had the #1 high school team in America.
Wow.
So we were really good in those periods there. And Frank came watching us. And I'll tell you this, aside to this, Gary Cunningham, who went to Inglewood High and was took John Wooden's first team to the Final Four. Gary was a botany major, and he wore a bow tie, and he'd sit there, never say a word, but the smartest guy I've ever known. Smartest guy I've ever known. So Frank would come watch us play and then go back in the office and say, boy, and Gary would just listen to him. Well, Frank and his wife Bee and took my wife and I out to dinner, and he said, hey, I'm going to be a head coach someday. I want you to be my assistant. And that's the first time I ever thought about being a college coach. I mean, I just an English teacher and a high school basketball coach, and he applied for the Utah State job and didn't get it. Knew the guy, called him, congratulated him, said, what are you looking for? He said, I need somebody from Southern California. Frank said, I got the guy for you.
Oh.
And they ended up hiring me. So Frank Arnold got me into college. And I mean, my life indebted to him. I went to his funeral and with his wife and Gib and his sons and daughters. And I just loved the guy. And 2 years later, he got the BYU job. He called me and said, come on, we're going to build a house. I got a guy building us a house. I said, I'm not coming for personal reasons. And I didn't go. And 2 years later, when he got the job, Wooden had just quit, and Frank got the BYU job the year Wooden quit. So Wooden had been out 2 years. And 2 years after that, UCLA gave Gene Bartow had the job and quit and took the athletic director job and basketball coach at Alabama Birmingham. So the UCLA job was open, and they gave it to Gary Cunningham. Well, Gary Cunningham had listened to Frank all those years and ended up hiring me. So I became the assistant at UCLA for 2 years.
What year was that?
That was 77 to 79.
Okay.
And then I got the Pepperdine job after that and became a head coach in 79 at Pepperdine. And we won the league 5 times the first 9 years we were there and had a great run there. Had a great run in high school, great run at Pepperdine. And really were the only coach that's been to 8 straight NCAA tournaments at UCLA. I was there 8 years. We went to 8 straight tournaments and won it all. And so I've just had a glorious run. It's been
I need to interrupt you just for a second, because to come in after you were significantly after the legend John Wooden, but here at BYU, or my experience that when LaVell Edwards retired, that's a tough role to fill when you have such a legend, and John Wooden is maybe one of the highest legends in coaching worldwide, So I remember going to a meeting where he taught his pyramid of success and the details that he went through. And then I was so impressed to hear and read that you, James Harrick, kind of studied him closely.
I started coaching in high school in 1964, the year he won his first national championship. And I looked out there and said, whoo, I like that. I want my teams to play like that. So I bought his book, went to his clinics, went to his practices, studied everything about him, every drill, every offense, every defense. And I was just a John Wooden guy, and I followed him, and I do what he does. Everything he does, I do. And it's worked out really, really, really good for him. And I remember I became the head coach at Morningside High School in 1969. And I played a game out in the valley here, Sherman Oaks, and we drove over and played there. And I sent my team on the floor. I turned around to sit down, and 4 rows behind me sitting John Wooden, who had just won his 7th national championship, watching me coach my 5th game in high school. I thought we were out nervous.
No pressure.
Yeah. And we had a kid who hit 9 wing shots, would have been 3s today, but not. And he comes down after the game, and never one time after that encounter did he not know my name and call me by Jim every time he ever saw me. And we're standing there talking. He says, well, I really like your guy on the wing. I said, well, Coach, I go to all your practices. I go to all your games, your clinics. I said, you tell your player, I'm going to get you a shot, son. You got to make it. And that's what I told him. I said, now you get over there and shoot 3,000 of them this summer. Because when we get out there, you're going to make it. And that's what happened. Oh, he lit up like a Christmas tree. I said, I got that from you. And lo and behold, the next summer, the guy called me and said, I want you to be the director of my basketball camps. I said, okay. And he went on, it's going to be at Cal Luther. And he went on. He said, by the way, it's going to be John Wooden basketball camp. So for 4 summers, 6 weeks a year, we had 600 at camp every week. We'd have a long row of lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 meals. Coach sat there. The director sat right across from me. I said, fellas, ask him questions. And we all got a master's degree in coaching from the legend, the greatest teacher of basketball that's ever been known.
And even beyond that, one of the greatest teachers of life principles.
Yes. He, it wasn't all about basketball, but, when he quit coaching, he had an office. I was an assistant, and he had an office in the Morgan Center, J.D. Morgan Center. So I'd go in there and talk to him. He'd come in my office and talk to him. He and his wife came out to our house for brunch one Sunday morning, and we were friends beyond basketball. And I remember when his wife she was 100 days in intensive care in 84. My wife and I went twice and sat there. One night we'd sit there and talk, but the next night we went in there, no one ever said a word. We just sat there. But you know what? He never forgets stuff like that. Never forgets stuff like that. I remember when she passed away, and I'm a basketball coach at UCLA, and the UCLA SC football game, huge thing in LA. I called him. I said, hey, I'd like to take you to the game. He said, okay. So I picked him up about 10 o'clock in the morning and took him home about 9 o'clock at night. My wife and I, just the 3 of us. And we never one time talk basketball. It was just one of the great days we walked around the Rose Bowl, all the tailgate parties. I'm with John Wooden and I and my wife. I mean, it was just a spectacular day. And he was something. He was just funny, wise, intelligent. He was a special guy.
He really was. And to me, now you knew him more personally, but his demeanor and it seemed obvious that he was a humble person.
Very humble. He never let success go to him. He handled it better than anybody I've ever known. But now I know he raised his voice a few times to the coach. But you know what? It's so funny. Young kids, they're about 4 or 5 turned on him. And I remember one guy who's a producer out here in movies, took him 25 years before he would talk to Coach Wooden again. Because he was a big star in high school, went to UCLA. When UCLA in those days, when I was a high school coach, they could have 12 on scholarship, but they could also give
walk-ons,
free tuition to guys.
Right.
So a lot of guys wanted to go to UCLA. So he had about 22 guys on his team. And I tell you, there were some great players that never played. If you got in his doghouse, he was a stubborn fool. I remember when we beat Connecticut Saturday afternoon in Oakland to go to the Final Four. You know how big that is. So I fly back and get my wife. I take her home. I drive right to John Wooden's house, a condo out in the valley. He has to buzz you in his gate, and I buzz him in. Hey, Coach, it's Jim. Come on up. So I go up the stairs, go up the elevator, and I walk down the hall, and he's standing in the doorway, arms folded and head down. Now, I'd just gone to the Final Four for the first time as a UCLA basketball coach. I don't know what he's going to say. I'm interested to hear, congratulations, Jim. I'm happy for you. You're whatever he's going to say. And he just looked up at me and says, no no, I'm not going to the Final Four. I said, Coach, you got to go. So I went back Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday and begged him to go to the Final Four. He wouldn't go. But finally, on Wednesday, Arthur Anderson got him a speaking engagement and a private plane, and that's what he wanted. He didn't like the fly commercial. So one of the greatest thrills of my life was having John Wooden in Seattle when we won the national championship.
What a wonderful thing. And you know, those kinds of experiences radiate, because I can attest that here's a group of young men playing Division III basketball in Virginia, Southern Virginia, in a place they call Buena Vista, not Buena Vista. And these young men had a coaching legend in their huddle, sharing these continued wisdom and witticisms that you have.
Well, you know, it's funny. We have, my wife and I was married my high school sweetheart, and we were married 49 years. And she got sick and passed away. And Monty and Melanie.
Monty is Coach Harrick's which son?
First son.
First son. Okay, oldest
son. He and Melanie, a couple years later, Mother and I never forget Melanie saying, "I'm so sick of you moping around," because I was a dead man walking. You know, you lose your wife, that's no fun. She introduced me to a gal in her church who had lost her husband. And she got in the car, and the first thing she said, well, I'll never marry again. I said, well, I'll never marry again either. I'd never planned on that. Well, we just celebrated our 13th wedding anniversary last week, and it's been, the Lord put us together, Mike. There's absolutely no question about that, because it's been just absolutely marvelous. But we have a granddaughter, her granddaughter, my step-granddaughter. I saw her play. I shouldn't tell you this. I said, before we got married, I said, I'd rather have a good case of something than watch women's basketball. She smacked me upside the head. She didn't. When we finally got married one day, she said, hey, we're sitting on the couch. She said, let's go watch Kylie play basketball. I said, you want me to go to a third grade girls basketball game? She said, yes, that's what grandparents do. So we go, and I score 16-0. She's got all 16. So now that changes everything. So I get her and I take her out and work her. I work her out 100 times. She just got a scholarship to Utah as a girls basketball player. She's on the Utah Utes women's basketball team right now.
What's her name?
Kylie Ray.
Kylie Ray.
Now, she plays behind a girl I call Ty Sedney, who was a guard for me. She played behind a 4-year starting point guard, so she didn't get a lot of time, and that's okay because she's learning and growing and on.
What year in school is she?
She's a freshman.
Oh, wow. Great.
Nobody plays freshman anywhere in the country unless you're just an absolute superstar. So the moral of the story is I watch a lot of women's basketball. I watch a lot of Division III basketball. And you know what? It's so pure. It's so much better than men's basketball. It's absolutely incredible to me how they share the ball, how they move the ball, how their spacing is so good. And men's basketball is nowhere near. And you know what? I learned going down to Atlanta, watching those Division III guys. They have fun playing basketball. They're there for the pure joy of basketball.
And they like each other. That's right. It's pure. And the wonderful thing is they're pulling together. Now, when Monty told me your story of when you went out on the court, he said it's amazing, but he changed your story or your pitch, because he said it's amazing what happens when you pass the ball and you don't worry who scores or something like that.
It's amazing, Mike, what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit.
There you go.
And it's just absolutely incredible. Nobody cares who the leading scorer is, who the leading rebounder is, who the best is, who this is, who that is. And that was my emphasis to them. If you guys play together and share the ball and help each other on offense and help each other on defense and are a good teammate and help each other up and play together and cheer for each other, it's amazing what teams can accomplish. Much lesser talented teams can be superior talented teams if you really play together.
And I'm going to make a confession here because I loved football. My father was a professional baseball player, but basketball was my favorite sport. It was just fun. And we had a coach that was more geared towards John Wooden. In fact, I'll date myself here. Do you remember Bill Cartwright?
I remember Bill Cartwright. Played against him. When I was an assistant at UCLA, we played in the I'll tell you what, we played at the Marriott Center. Played San Francisco, an undefeated San Francisco team at the Marriott Center, and Bill Cartwright was killing us. We had two centers, and he killed them both. Well, I'll never forget it. We're in the huddle in about the third quarter, middle of the second half, and Kiki VanDeWeghe was there, and he says, "Coach, I'll watch him." Kiki VanDeWeghe went in there. It was 6'8", watching a 7'1" guy. Shut him out the rest of the way. We won the game. So
wow.
I know Cartwright well, yeah.
Well, Bill Cartwright's my age, and where I grew up, Rancho Cordova, California, is very close to Elk Grove, California, where Bill Cartwright played at Kerr Junior High and then at Elk Grove High School. And here I was, at that time I'm 6'4". Now I've kind of shrunk. I'm a little bit less than 6'3". But here I am, the football player, so that's why I'm guarding Bill Cartwright. And Bill Cartwright, like you said, is 7'1", so I'm coming up to here on Bill Cartwright. And back then, they claimed that he always went to that John Wooden or some John Wooden camp. Yeah, do you remember him from those camps?
John Wooden had a couple little day things before that. When he was
special players,
probably when Bill Cartwright was younger. Yeah,
yes.
But he never came. I don't remember him coming to our basketball camp. He might have, but I don't remember him coming to our basketball camp when I was director.
It would have been one of those special John Wooden things. But anyway, long story short, again, like Kiki VanDeWeghe, I did my best to shut him down. I didn't shut him down, and he still had a great shot, but Kiki VanDeWeghe ended up being a great player too.
15 years in the league. His father, Ernie, was an NBA player and became a doctor, and he was a pediatrician. And my three sons went to Ernie VanDeWeghe, and right there in Inglewood at the Job Club Clinic. It used to be the Job Club Clinic, and before they passed away, and Job invented Tommy John surgery.
Wow.
So Ernie was in good hands, but I was the coach at Morningside, and Kiki was 8 years old. He used to come in the gym and shoot around. So I got to know them and the family really, really well. And I went to UCLA, and Kiki was there as a player, and he was really good, really good.
And he put in so much effort.
And when I retired from coaching, he was the general manager of the Denver Nuggets and hired me as a scout for the Denver Nuggets. And I did that for 3 years.
Refresh my memory, but I think Kiki VanDeWeghe's mother might have been LDS.
She was she Miss Utah.
That's right. Okay.
Miss Utah. Uh-huh.
It's a small world, Jim, Coach. I love, again, you claimed in that podcast that this came from John Wooden, but someone came up to you before a game. I think it was at Morningside. Maybe it was at UCLA. And they asked you, "Hey, Coach," it's probably at UCLA, "how's your team going to be this year?"
Well, I got that from Coach. Coach always said, people ask him how your team's going to be. He says, "I'll tell you in about 25 years.
I love that. Why? What? Tell us why.
When they become adults and see how they turned out, see what profession they chose, the family they chose, the choices they made in life, and not financially, but how you've contributed to the society and become a man, and much more than your basketball ability. And don't ever let basketball or football define you as a human being. You got to live your life, and you'll live your life. And my wife is the greatest. She says, she has a saying. She says, every one of our grandchildren, she says, choose the right. Choose the right. And that's right. Choose the right. If you choose the right, you'll be in good shape.
And that's what was so impressive to me about John Wooden. When I went to that conference and he gave such an impassioned speech on just living right. I remember I still have it. It's a picture of a man with his finger. It brings tears to my eyes thinking about it. But this man's on a beach and he has his little son by the finger.
It's called A Little Fellow Follows Me, a careful man I want to be. A little fellow follows me. I do not dare to go astray, for fear he'll go the self-same way. I cannot once look in his eyes, and whatever he sees, he tries. Like me, he says he's going to be the little chap who follows me. I dare not dare to go astray, for fear he'll go the self-same way. I cannot make us, He sent that to me when I had 3 sons and we're running this camp. He sent that to me. I mean, he's something. He's something.
Well, but listen, you just by memory shared something from decades ago that impacted you in your life and now can impact other people in their lives. And
I made big copies of it, and I send it to all my friends who have young boys, but also young girls too.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, because if I'm honest with you and with everybody, it was some of my coaches that impacted my life for good, a lot more, in fact, than even the great people at church that have impacted me for good.
Coaches have a way, I always told my grandkids, I said, I just want you to have a uniform. Just be on a team, because you learn so much. But then you get on a team and the parents and even the grandparents, like, you want more. Well, I want you to play. Then I want you to shoot. I want you to score. It just keeps growing.
Now I want you to be the star.
That's why you see parents most of the time out of control.
But what you and John Wooden portrayed, especially during game time, was a quiet, you did all your work in the, well, I don't know. I can't speak for you.
No, you're true.
But during the game, John Wooden sat back like he was uninvolved almost.
He always said, Jim, I did my work from 3 to 5:30. I'm done. He tells his team that I'm done. It's yours now. And you see these coaches up yelling and screaming and acting like a fool. And I want to admit, I made a fool of myself about 3 times a year. My wife would remind me that you made a fool out of yourself. But, I've seen him get after officials, and though he was wild with officials, but he sat down doing it, which was a little different. But I just and I developed that same philosophy. I did my work from 3 to 5:30, fellas. I've done my job. Now it's up to you to pass the test.
I heard you talking about your 1994 season. Now, again, this is the year before your national championship, and you went to, was it Tulsa, to play a game?
Well, we were number 1 in the country at mid-year, and my backup center had an operation on his back. Ed O'Bannon had a horrible problem. Ty Zedney had a high ankle sprain, and my other guy had back spasms. So we went 7-7 down the stretch, and walked into the NCAA tournament as a wounded duck. And when you're a wounded duck in the tournament, is football or basketball, you got no chance. It's funny. I really fell in love with BYU football this year I liked it. Tommy Homo, the athletic director, is from Crescenta Valley High School,
And
where
he and I were teammates and are good friends. I love Tom Holmo.
Tommy went to our high school where my granddaughter goes, and all our kids go right here in Crescenta Valley, La Crescenta, California. And so I like Tommy a lot, and I followed them, and I thought that they were the best team in the Big 12 this year, and they unbelievable game they played at Utah, where Utah led them all but the last second game. I thought that hurt them more than it helped them. Now, I think they lost their mojo the last two games and just didn't have the kind of juice. They showed it in the bowl game how good they were. They were a good team. I think, were a lot better than Arizona State, but that's just part of athletics. Is you got to do it when you got to do it.
Well, like John Wooden, I assume you have an opinion. So I have a question. So I have a question because we met with one of the players this morning, and I'm so impressed with a philosophy that Coach Kalani Sitake, has done with his team. But it probably coincides a lot with what you and Coach Wooden did. And his philosophy is love and learn. And what bothered me at first, I feel like, on the court, on the field, during the play, I'm going to come at you, and in football, I'm going to knock you down. I'm going to do everything I can to knock you down, or whatever my role is. And then after the play, I'm going to pick you up, or you might pick me up because maybe you won that play, but we're going to smile and love each other, respect each other. And at first I worried, like, oh no, I mean, we're not going to have that tenacity that you need on the field of the court. But now it feels like it's working. How does that jive with how you coached?
Exactly the way, because there's not too many coaches in America. Football, basketball, baseball, gymnastics, that haven't studied a little bit about John Wooden. I mean, everybody quotes him. Everybody does something that he did, because he was so dynamic and so famous, and that was the same thing. Never get up, so you never get down. You can't play and lose your emotion. Keep your emotions under control. We preach that all the time, and don't get up, don't get down. You don't have the good coaches. You never know whether they win or lose. And I tried that demeanor, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But it's just, boy, he was a master. He was a master.
Well, I'm impressed that Kalani Sitake, Coach Sitake, is coaching in a way that's very distinct from most coaches, because they don't lead with, "Hey, I'm going to love and learn, but I'm going to beat you on the court."
Yeah.
And that's an impressive for these college kids these days. I'm impressed that this might be the wave of the future, because they're attracting a lot of good players to come. And
I hope, because I always told my team, we win or we learn. That's all.
Good point.
Win or we learn. And I see a lot of coaches, not a lot, but I see some doing that. I think Kyle Whittingham's that way. I really like him. I love Solani. He's done a great job there. And, you watch those guys closely, and I think both of them are like that.
I think you're right. Kyle Whittingham was a teammate, and he's an intense coach, but he cares about people, and that your players know when you care. You said, well, first of all, what did you learn from that experience in 1994? You went in limping. Yeah, you lost that game, but I think you or the players took from that something that was really important for the next year in 1994.
Well, Ed O'Bannon was a Gatorade National Player of the Year, and he's so quiet, so unassuming. That's the first thing you learn in coaching. You got to find the button that will make this young guy tick. Some guys you can yell at and scream, and some guys that you can't do that to. You got to put your arm around them and whisper to him. And Ed O'Bannon, he never reacted to yelling and screaming. And but I wanted more. You know, as a coach, you always want more. You always want more. You always want more. Well, that game made him the leader he is today, because he said, that's enough of that. I'm taking over this team, and got him the next day in the gym, and he's after him hard. And boy, he and Tyus Edney and George Zedek had 3 seniors that were just marvelous leaders, great workers, great camaraderie on our team. And to this day, we have bonds that are just, they call me all the time. And I remember our 25th anniversary, we had a Zoom call. It was like this with 18 guys on it. Guys were in Japan, Czechoslovakia, all over the country, and we got on there for about 3 hours, and it was one of the highlights of my life. It was just a great, great, great evening.
The joy and the frustrations of sport so much parallel our lives. And what's beautiful about this adversity that you suffered in 94, you went in limping and suffering, and you lost the game. But the next year, you and your team were dedicated to a goal, and guys like Ed O'Bannon and Tyus Edney led you to a national championship. I think I heard you say 32-2 or something like that, your record. Now, one more thing. I know I'm carrying this conversation on quite a bit, but it was interesting, again, talking about John Wooden and his modest effort to, and here he gave his opinion, but I think you shared, again, on that podcast, that he was watching a game or something, and you were working on your team of trying to find out what group of players was going to work right. And he took you aside after a game. He took you aside and he was quiet. And he told you that one of your players saw the court better than any other. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was a clinic. We had a clinic where all the high school coaches in Southern California come to our clinic, because we're a very popular school. UCLA is a very popular school.
Unbelievable.
Most of the coaches would come. We'd have speakers in the morning, 4 or 5, and then in the afternoon I'd conduct practice. So I invited him. He came. He sat over there with the coaches. He loved that. Loved coaches. So I'm walking up and down, and he says, "Jim." So I walk over there, and I was sitting down. He says, "That little fella out there sees the floor better than anybody you got." So right away, that guy's in the rotation. Automatically, he's in the rotation, and so he sees things like that, and he's like,
and that was Tyus Edney.
Tyus Edney, yeah, he was a freshman then.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history.
I love that.
Yeah.
And those stories, I know we could go on and on. Your experiences, your grandson Nate, Cade. What am I calling him Nate for? Yeah, Cade and my son Luke are playing together in basketball. What would you like to share with our audience from beyond the game of things that are most important to you in life, whether it's faith-based or coaching-based? What are your feelings that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, I always want every one of my players to be practice planned and prepared. And if your children are out there, or anybody's out there, you're doing schoolwork, you're doing a speech, you got anything you have to do, you have to be practice planned and prepared. And that, to me, that equals performance. I hope that, again, it's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit, are things that lifelong things that you learn. And I learned all that stuff from John Wooden. And I just, I preach it to my grandkids all the time. And they say you got more sayings than anybody. And I wrote a book during COVID. I wrote a book to my grandchildren only. And in the end of it, I have some Wooden-isms, a whole list of them. I have some Harrick-isms also. They love that stuff, but that's just for them. But I've collected all this stuff, and I kind of people say, "Oh, he's just a motivational coach," and when you're a teacher, you are just a teacher of basketball. That's all I was. I was an English teacher. I was a social studies teacher. I taught math in junior high and stuff like that. But then I became finally a teacher of basketball. You've got to have knowledge of the subject matter, and you've got to know how to teach. That children learn 10% when they hear it, 20% when they see it, and 70% when they do it. And the laws of learning are explanation, demonstration, correction, and repetition. So many guys get out of college just going to coach. They don't understand things like that. You got to have a certain amount of discipline. Now, discipline is what you do for someone, not to someone. And you got to have a certain amount of motivation. I mean, I spent 30 seconds every day, I called it a moment of motivation. When the going gets tough, a great competitor is a real love of a hard battle. Inch by inch, life's a cinch. Yard by yard, life is hard. And I put that on the board every day. I'd have one saying for my guys. And you know what? It's amazing. 25 years later, they repeat those things to me sometimes when I see them. My greatest one is be on time when time's involved. Don't you make anybody ever wait on you.
Well, and I won't. Well, actually, I will. I'm going to confess that when we were setting up this call, which is so important, here we are with a coaching legend, and I'm grateful for you to be here. But the hilarious part about this is that we didn't have the connection perfect. Well, actually, my setup wasn't perfect, and so it took more minutes, and time was involved. But
here's another one of my things. I'm glad you didn't blame it on your assistant. Say, man's not a failure till he starts blaming someone else.
Amen. And trust me, without the assistant, we would have done this on another day.
If I'm pointing the finger at you, I got 3 pointing at me. And I tell my players, so many times I was telling you, play your way in the lineup and you play your way out of the lineup. I don't decide who plays. You decide who plays. And the greatest one I've got, if it is to be, it's up to me. And tell you, if it is to be, it's up to me. It's up to you, young man, to make this young lady, same thing. If it is to be, it's up to me.
Brother, Coach, Jim, your wisdom applies to a lot more than basketball. And so thank you.
I hope so. We got 18 grandkids, 17 siblings. No, we got 27 grandkids and 17 siblings, and it never stops.
Life goes on, and we're very blessed. But one of the funniest things that I heard from you that you shared with me is about being retired. And someone asked you, can you share what you said? Because
what do you do? I said, I do nothing, and I don't start that till noon.
Brother James Harrick, legendary national champion coach of not only UCLA, but many other programs, including Georgia, Pepperdine, Utah State.
Rhode Island, where I had Lamar Odom.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
I mean,
I went to his wedding with Chloe, and
Coach, it is a joy. I hope that we can reconnect to do this, where we can talk about Coach Wooden and the stories that you could share with us in an hour about that. I know we've talked about a lot of them here, but
yeah, he was an interesting guy. I mean, I just love the guy.
Love it. When I was talking with actually two of the coaches, Andy Reid and then Brian Billick and Steve Young, all have talked about Bill Walsh, and to some degree, Bill Walsh was a John Wooden type coach. I bet
John Wooden of football,
the John Wooden of football. We're blessed for these people, and we're
But-
blessed for you because we have you with us.
I tell you, if you're a young coach or a young teacher or somebody, if you find someone who can be a great, great, great mentor to you and teach you how to do it right, how to do it the right way. A lot of people don't ever get that opportunity. I had that opportunity, and I thank the Lord for that.
I know this doesn't fit in this time. I know I've kept you on almost an hour here, but it reminds me of Coach Edwards. Coach LaVell Edwards and I were with a group. We were actually on a touring golf event that went to Ireland and Scotland. And up there, they call the rough is called the gorse. And the gorse can be really, really rough. I mean, it's thick and almost impossible to hit out of. Well, anyway, I approached the green, but I was pin high, but I was up in the gorse above the green. And so I had to pitch on. And Coach Edwards, like normal, was on the green waiting for me. And so he was, I'm pitching downhill, and he's like 45 degrees away and maybe 30, 25 yards. He's on the green. Well, somehow through the gorse, whatever, my ball hit the hosel. I hit the hosel, or maybe it was Eli, my assistant here. Anyway, I hit the ball, a looping soft line drive right at Coach Edwards, and I felt terrible. Like, oh no, I'm going to hit Coach Edwards. And right afterwards, he said, "Hey, Lacey, I didn't know I was in your direct line of fire." You coaches have a way of settling us down when emotions can get pretty high. And more than a teacher, you guys are powerful in helping people get there the way they need to get there.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
Pleasure talking with you, James Harrick, coach at UCLA, national champion. And I hope that we run into each other at Cade and Luke's basketball games at SVU.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
I do too. Thanks for your time today. Thank you for watching another episode of Beyond the Game. Remember to click here to subscribe and click here to watch our recent videos. Also, please follow us on social media. And remember, go Cougs.